Robert Noguera.
Present.
David Brown. Robert Clark. David Davenport.
Here.
Carolyn Gomes. David Goodfellow.
Here.
Brett Kulikovich. Michael McHugh.
Okay, if you could join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first item on the agenda tonight is school entry age policy exemption request for the 2014-2015 school year. Vote is required. 2014, I'm sorry, 2014-2015. Yep. Sorry. Get behind.
I think our office has
Okay, all you have to do is pull the card.
as you know, the school committee has a policy regarding entry age for kindergarten and for grade 1. That policy for kindergarten is that a student entering kindergarten must be 5 years of age before August 31st. And similarly, in grade 1, another school, they must be 6 years old by August 31st. We included that policy for you again as a reminder, and I believe in addition to this, the chair had asked what other districts do, so I think we were able to provide you, do they have it in your packet?
Yes.
A list of all of the districts across the state of Massachusetts and what their entrance age and what their policies are, particularly what they're starting to do here. So I do not speak for Mr. Oliveira, but he is here this evening, certainly can speak for himself and his request. So obviously only the school committee can waive this policy, so we invite him to be here this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Noguera. First off, thank you for putting me on the agenda this evening and putting me on early. I know how long these meetings can go. I'd like to wait till the end. The reason I'm here tonight is my daughter is 4. She's currently in the preschool system in Freetown, Lakeville right now. Her birthday is September 1st. She's actually born at 8 o'clock in the morning on September 1st. And had she been born 8 hours earlier, I wouldn't need to be here in front of you, gentlemen and ladies. And I'm asking for an exemption for her to start kindergarten next year. I talked to her preschool teacher, my wife and I both have. She's progressing fine. She shouldn't have any issues starting early. Yeah, she should have been early off the bat, and then she wouldn't have to worry about getting exempted to start early. In any event, I mean, if you have questions for me, I don't know what types of information you want to know.
Being very respectful of the policies that the school committee is.
And I'm pleased to go first. Being the new principal of this school, it's given me quite an opportunity not only to learn my new clientele, but to get to know some of the unique things that were already in existence in the building that I inherited. I'd first like to call up 3 of our presenters tonight. I'd like to call up Luke Richards, and Mary Tomaszewski, and Brian Peterson. These are 3 of our grade 3 students who have volunteered bravely to come before you tonight and share something about our school that you may not be aware of. I would also like to introduce their teachers, Mrs. Susan Espete and Mrs. Virginia McGuire. I think they're going to take their posts. And I'm just going to do a little introduction, and then they're going to take it away. The use of technology in the classroom has changed dramatically over the past few years. And we just think about what our phones are capable of doing and how limited they were 5 or 10 years ago. When I was in elementary school myself, School technology consisted of a film strip projector and a tape recorder that beeped when you had to advance to the next slide. The record player was also another novelty, and a fond memory of that is if you sat closely enough, you could smell the warm vinyl as the needle was spinning around it. And mimeographs, if we all remember those, that sweet smell of the mimeo paper if your test was just freshly run off. I didn't see my first computer in a classroom until I actually started teaching, and the Apple IIe was considered high-tech. So we certainly have come quite a long way. Classroom learning is not limited to the confines of the school day, and actually it expands beyond the walls of the classroom and beyond the school campus. For our presentation today, we wanted to share something that was fairly new and something that Assawamsett has been dabbling in for their second year. We wanted to show you something that creates unique learning experiences and experiences that happen before they actually enter the classroom that day. Let me set the scene. Let's say a teacher says, okay class, today we're going to be introducing long division, and instead you hear your students, instead of having that look of the doe in the headlights, as my fourth grade students used to say when I saw them with long division, they might say, yeah, that was cool last night. I think I'm getting the hang of it. How can this be if the student hasn't had any direct instruction from the teacher yet? And the answer to that is something called the flipped classroom. What does that mean? Instead of lecturing during a class and leaving students to figure out their assignments on their own or at home, the classroom actually gets flipped, where the students actually do some learning, in this case, at home, on their own home computers, and are exposed to the concept before they come into the classroom the next day. Whereas when the teacher introduces it, they're already familiar with the content. So we have some volunteers who are going to discuss their experiences with the flipped classroom. They're going to do a little demonstration, and our teachers will tell you a little bit more about the model that we've been using in their classroom.
So 2 summers ago, I went to MADPC, which is a Massachusetts Digital Publication Collaborative, 3-day geek session in Burlington, and with Jennifer Fair, who couldn't be with us tonight, but she's the special educator who works with Mrs. McGuire and I in our inclusive classrooms. And Jennifer and I just fell in love with all this stuff we were learning. We had just acquired iPads. We learned about different apps we could use with our students, not just our special ed students, but all students. And we came across this flipped classroom idea, which we had heard about through the Khan Academy, which probably most of you have read about or seen. You know, this dude who made a video for his nephew, calculus or something impossible to understand. And because he was a math teacher, he sent it off and to his nephew, and his nephew's like, I shared this with all my friends. And this idea was born of online learning, where you glean your basic concepts at home with some practice. Sometimes the kids have a worksheet, sometimes they take home some reference pages from their math book so they can follow along. And the next day when they come in, we give them something we call a formative assessment, which isn't an assessment at all in the sense of getting a grade. We call it, what do we call it, kids? A math check-in, a math check-in or a math checkup. We want to see where every student is in terms of what they've learned already about the topic. So they'll do this little formative assessment. It's usually 3 or 4 problems. And before math class comes along, then Mrs. McGuire and I and the special educator sit down and we sort them into 3 or 4 piles, depending on which skills the kids seem to have mastered, what they seem to understand, what they seem to need to work on. And we put them in groups according to those needs. So if there are children who totally grasp it, they might move on to a more advanced level with some challenging word problems or something like that to do on their own. If they're having a little bit of trouble, they might have some guided practice at a teaching table with one of us and then go off to practice and build some more skills. And if they are totally lost at sea, then they'll be in a very small group. We're lucky to usually have 4 adults between the 2 classrooms. We have a student teacher right now who's leaving us this week. We're going to be devastated. But anyway, so we can usually run 4 groups easily, sometimes more if we have enough independent kids. So it's been working out really well. This is our 2nd year. We've learned a lot. We did some polling of parents last year to see what they thought, had a lot of very positive feedback. The only negative feedback usually had to do with technological glitches, which, you know, we just all had to sort of go with that flow and fix them as they came up. But anyway, it's our second year, and we've expanded. Not only do we do it for math, but we also do it this year for cursive handwriting, and I think I can turn that over to Mrs. McGuire. It's her specialty.
Susan was doing such a great job, but I got the cursive after 12 years of parochial school. That's my forte. So we decided to do the cursive this year as a little experiment because, you know, there's a big debate probably nowadays about whether kids actually still need to be taught cursive handwriting, but we're still doing it. And this is a great way to have them really spend the time learning the strokes at home because, you know, honestly, it's a tough thing to fit into the curriculum with everything else that we have to do during the course of the day. So they get these little packets that they bring home at the beginning of the week. They practice the letters at home. They turn the packets in on Friday, so we know that they have done that. And I do, you know, do it on the video, one stroke at a time, so they're learning it, and they have everything right in front of them as they're practicing it. It's worked out really well, and we've started cursive much earlier this year than we have in previous years, so the kids are really coming along, and you can really see the progress. And I think, you know, this year it's probably going to go better than it has in previous years. So, and they're expected when they get into 4th grade to do everything in cursive still. So we're hoping it's going to work out. So I'm really happy with that.
Okay, so I guess we're ready. We thought we'd show you a video that says "Show Me Intro" up there. Luke, do you want to go show them how you would access that video if you were home? One of the kids all go up there. And Luke will show you. You're already logged in and everything. It's logged in as me, so you can just show them how you would watch this video. The intro, the one with the "Show Me Intro." It's right in the middle. Yeah, that one. Yep. Do we have sound? Jim, are the speakers hooked up?
Yeah.
Oh, there it goes.
Maybe they're not turned on. Maybe the button's not turned up. Hold on.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you 6 questions during this video, and you are going to pause the video and answer them as you watch. This is to teach you how to be an active viewer and pay close attention as you are watching the videos. When you are watching math videos, you will either have questions to answer or problems to finish when you have finished viewing the video. This is how we can be sure that you are actually watching your videos every night, because this is a very important part of your math instruction. So, I would like you to pause the video right now, and next to the number 1, write down what color are the dots on this opening page.
This
That
was
would be
just to
number
teach
1.
them the basics, you know, in the first week or so of school.
You may pause a video as often as you like. You may watch it more than once. You may watch it anytime you need to if you're having trouble with your math. Having a show me video is like having your teacher in the living room. Now I would like you to pause the video again. If you are in Mrs. McGuire's class, next to the number 2, please tell me what color her name is written in. If you are in Mrs. Esporte's class, next to the number 2, please tell me what color her name is written.
Yeah, Luke, you can stop it.
Show me.
So that That was to teach them just the mechanics of it, how they would manipulate the videos every night. The math ones are a little bit more complex than that, obviously. This is very simplified, but we just wanted them to know how to pause, stop, do their work, go back and check it. I think this would be a good time for the kids to come up here and talk to you with their comments. They have each prepared some comments about what they like about using the Show Me. And they've also prepared some comments about other ways that we use technology in our classrooms. So why don't you guys come on up here, we can give you the mic. You know what to do.
I like the show. I like how the teachers talk to me on the videos. It feels like I'm really at school. Sometimes it's easier than asking parents for help.
You know that new math. Right?
On the cursive videos, the letters sometimes look hard, but then when I watch them and begin practicing, it gets easier. I like it how you get to pause the video, try examples on your own, and then check out your work. If you don't understand something, you can look at things again. It's also fun to see what you'll be doing in class the next day.
Nice job, guys. So, do you want to now, maybe Mary, you want to go show them just the beginning of a cursive video? So X out of that, close out of that one, and just scroll to any other cursive ones. Luke, you can go up there. So we'll just show you a little bit of how a cursive one starts. They have one every week with 4 letters. We have recently finished the lowercase and started the uppercase.
Did you hate those? Okay.
Hello, boys and girls in Mrs. Esparte's and Mrs. McGuire's classes. This year, as you know, you will be using cursive writing, and you will be learning and practicing it at home using our flipped classroom model. Every Monday, you will be given a packet with 4 letters to practice. The packet needs to be turned into your teacher by Friday, along with your reading and math logs. The letters that you're going to be practicing don't necessarily go in order according to the alphabet. They are built in a certain way based on how the letters are formed. What we do is we go through all the lowercase letters first, and then we begin working on the uppercase letters. As you can see here, the first 4 letters you're going to be learning and practicing are lowercase I, T, U, and W. Keep in mind that you will not need to do all 4 letters of your packet on the same day. The lessons are given on the video in such a way that you can stop it. You can do a little bit each night. You can always rewind and practice again. Any way you wish. Keep in mind, though, that you probably shouldn't keep everything for the last night, because then you'll have a lot of work that you need to get done in time to turn it in on Friday. You'll notice that this week's packet, because it is the first week, has a blank page on the front with some lines. The reason this is there is so we can first start with some strokes that are going to be used in all your letters. And I'd like you to practice along with me.
Actually, guys,
so
I
that
think
you
you could
get
probably
used to
stop
using
that.
them.
Probably more than enough.
Also, there's something.
So, if you guys want to come and talk about what you like about other technology, other things we use in the classroom. Each kid chose a different piece of equipment that we're using in our classrooms, and we have projectors such as the one you see on the cart here. They're mounted overhead. They're hooked up to our computers. We can also hook iPads up to them. We have document cameras, which if you're not familiar with those, they're like the old overhead projectors, except that they project a real image. You don't have to make a transparency. Anything you put under there, you put your hand under there and your hand is on the screen. We can read a book to the whole class and everybody can see the pictures on the screen. We do, if we're doing the beginning of a lesson and we're doing a worksheet together before the children practice on their own, that goes under the document camera and we do it together. And the third thing we have on our list was the iPad. So each kid is going to talk a little bit about what we use those for, and then we will wrap it up. All right, Luke.
I like the document camera because we use it for worksheets. We do it, the teachers show us how we do it, and then sometimes we do it together. And then they give us like worksheets to do independent so they can see how we're doing with that subject. I like how if we're curious about something, we can go on the projector and look what it looks like or what it is.
For example, give them our best example.
One time we were talking about yams and we looked up yams and we got to see some pictures.
Some real African yams. Big. Talking sweet potatoes.
We actually use the iPad for doing groups sometimes, so it's a good way for us to learn math and that we get to use the iPad for us to know math.
Excellent. Very nice job. So the kids use the iPads in small groups, sometimes with or without a teacher, depends on what the activity is. They play phonics bingo, they play math games, they practice the math skills that we're currently learning in class. So all of these things go together quite nicely. We're talking right now about a Bluetooth connection for the projectors so that I'll be able to walk around the room with that iPad, and whatever is happening on the iPad, whether it's me or a kid, everybody will be able to see it and share it up on the screen. So that's our next big step. And that's technology in third grade.
Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I'd just like to give a round of applause to all involved tonight. Teachers and students. I just want you to look how poised these young students were and think back when you were in third grade. Could you get in front of a group of adults like this and speak so eloquently as they did? Speaking in front of their peers is something that we encourage a lot of, so they get practice. I don't remember getting that as a child. So I would say they were well prepared to do their presentation tonight. So well done, we're very proud of you. And thank you for your attention.
And thank you, parents, for bringing your children to us. Thank you very much.
Great job, guys.
Could you note that the main role presenters here?
Yes, I did talk to you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have Mr. Burke. Welcome.
Let's take advantage of the use of a microphone if possible, so I'm glad this is here. Hide behind this podium as well. My name is Aaron Burke. I'm a former school committee member. I was on the school committee from 2009 through 2012 and served with many folks here at the table. And around that time frame, I worked with some other school committee people as well as some parents to start an education foundation, the Freetown Lakeville Education Foundation. And I'm here tonight to award, or announce, I should say, the award of our first round of grants. We have finally raised money and given some money back into the school district. And I'm very excited about that. And I think that Principal LaBelle's presentation was kind of encouraging to me, because that's the type of stuff that we're trying to do, is promote the use of technology in the classroom and try to enhance the quality of learning for all students. So at this time, I just would like to announce the names of the recipients. Our initial grant cycle was what we call a mini grant, so these are $500 or under, and we awarded 6 of them in all. So Julie Mills at Aponequid Regional High School was awarded one for the Physics Olympics. This will give funds to supply, or I should say the funds will be used to purchase supplies and travel for students to compete in early April 2014 at the Massachusetts Physics Olympics, which is an annual competition for high school students that's sponsored by, you guessed it, the American Association of Physics Teachers. So we're excited about that. It's a great opportunity for those students. The second grant that we awarded is to Maura Irwin at Aponequid. It's for purchasing a visual arts smart board projector. They have an existing whiteboard, but they don't have a projector, so this will be used to enhance the use of that device. The third one that we awarded is to Amanda Nardi. She is at Aponequid as well, and this is for technology for the AP Spanish class. We're helping to fund the purchase of some headsets and microphones, which are for use in the classroom to prepare them for the AP Spanish exam later this year. The fourth award is to Jocelyn Lanye. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Lanny. Sorry if I butchered your name. We're awarding the grant for the purpose of the purchase of an iPad to enhance the core curriculum and technology in the Freetown Lakeville Early Childhood Education Center. The fifth award is to Lisa Cloutier at the Freetown Elementary School, and that's for use in the special education realm. And Jennifer Fair at Assawamsett Elementary School is the last recipient of our grants, of our grant cycle. And this is for a program that she put forward called Social Thinking. She's going to expand this curriculum for purposes of enhancing education at that school. I really want to thank everybody in the community for donating to FLEF, the Freetown Lakeville Education Foundation. We've raised over $8,000 at this point in time. We've been in existence for a little bit over a year. It was a year in September. So we are a new organization. We're always looking for people to get involved. If you can volunteer time, if you can help us in any way that you can think of, it's greatly appreciated. We have a website. We also have a Facebook page. If you like that page, when we have board meetings, you can go to that to learn when those meetings are going to be. They're typically in the public, and you're all welcome to come and get involved. Our next grant cycle, we're hoping to get something. This was our first one, and it definitely had its challenges in terms of timing and a whole bunch of different things. But it's like anything. Once you do it, you learn how to do it, and you get better at it. So what we're trying to do is we're going to try to put together a grant cycle in the spring this year so that awards will happen over the summer for purposes of getting money into the classrooms for the beginning of the school year. So I want to make sure I explain that now so that in the spring, if there's teachers in the district, they can look for more information about when that starts, and hopefully they can participate. We can only fund grants that we receive requests for. So I encourage teachers in the district, please, 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 if you have an idea, send it to us, and if we have the money and the resources to support it and it makes sense, we'll certainly do our best to fund it. And that's pretty much it. Again, I thank everybody that has supported us over this past year and a half or so. I encourage everybody that is interested to try to help us as well. And with any luck, we'll be able to give more money out this next summer for the next school year. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard.
I would just like to, on behalf of the school district, thank the association and thank the individuals in the foundation. I think the teachers appreciate the fact that the community supports them,
And the fact that this has started, I looked at the variety of grants that people had submitted. I think all of them, as you and I spoke a little about them, are going to be extremely worthwhile and are going to certainly advantage our students and give them more opportunities. And so on behalf of the school district, I really thank the community for coming forward. And certainly, if you send us the application form and you give us the time frame, we will certainly disseminate that to all of our staff to make it easier for you. So thank you.
On to item number 3, Dr. Nash.
Sure. Okay. All right, Alice. Okay. So we have Ryan. I think our SRO officer is here this evening to make a presentation. But before he does, I'd like to just give you some background information, if I might, about his presentation. One of the things that certainly all of us are continually concerned about is the safety and well-being of our students, and obviously the protocols that we have in place in our district. And many years ago, in response to all of the tragedies that happened across the country in Littleton and Columbine, procedures were developed. Those procedures typically ran the gamut. And when we think about it, many of those procedures at this point in time came about as a result of tragedies that happened in 2006, 2007, and even before that. Along the way, other things have happened, and I think, unfortunately, from tragedy and tragedies that happen, such as Newtown, we learn more. We learn that some of the things that we do well, and some of the things that we need to improve and look at. And quite frankly, what you're going to hear this evening is really what has come out of both, I would say, federal guidelines, and those guidelines were really developed as a result of the Newtown tragedy that the Vice President of the United States was tasked with by the President in developing those, and those guidelines came out not too long ago in a rather large document called Guide for Developing High-Quality School Emergency Operations Plans. And as a result of that, what you're going to hear tonight is really one of the new standards. It's called ALICE, and I'm going to let our SRO officer, Maltese, talk to you about it. It is not a replacement of what we do, but it's an option, and it gives us other options when we have an incident that we need to respond to, and we have a violent, active intruder. So we're going to talk to you about it this evening. We wanted you to hear about it. There are many communities in this state who have already received training. The luck for us is that our officer is certified to train and has trained others in ALICE. I want to be very careful to say that it is an option, an additional option, that we want our staff and our students to be trained in when we deal with these types of situations, and we hope that we never deal with those situations, but recognize that it can happen. So without anything else, I'm going to introduce Officer Maltese, and he's going to do a presentation. I would say to you that this is simply information this evening. If the committee feels that this is something that they would like us to begin to explore, then our next step would be that I would propose that we bring this forward to all of the other administrators, our full administrative staff, to hear about that we invite our parents, and that to hear about that at a future meeting, that we have some informational meetings with our staff, and then if all of that goes well, that we would then move forward to do some of that training. So there are lots of steps along the way, and this is really the first step to introduce you as the school committee members to this, and to hopefully our community who are watching this evening and in the audience. So, Officer Maltese.
Thank you, Dr. Nash.
Have you heard about this story? Do your homework, right?
do your classroom yet?
Good evening, everyone. As Dr. Mack said, I'm Officer Ryan Maltese. I'm currently the school resource officer. Been here since last year. This will be my second year in the schools. Just a little bit of history about myself. I currently have a student in our district, a daughter. She's over at Gray's, fourth grade student. I have 14 years total in public safety, 12 years with the Lakewood Police Department, 8 years with the fire department. Getting into tonight's topic, I'm a certified ALICE trainer, certified to instruct the ALICE training program. I'm a certified BLS instructor, which is first responder, CPR, and I'm also trained in a multitude of school-related safety, active shooter classes. So our essential question: what can we do to keep students and ourselves safe until help arrives, if there is a violent intruder in our school? I threw this quote in here from Theodore Roosevelt. Thought it was fitting. In a moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The next best thing you can do is the wrong thing. The worst thing you can do is nothing. What is an active shooter, violent intruder? I won't read every slide verbatim to you, but a couple of these I want to just make it a point to go over. An active shooter is a person who is immediately causing death and/or serious bodily injury, not exclusively with a firearm. This could be accomplished with a knife, a bat, personal body weapon. For this reason, we refer to such person or persons as an active shooter or a violent intruder. It's not always necessarily going to be a firearm. There's some facts through the past tragedies that a lot of us are aware of. A violent situation where there's been active shooters that have come into school buildings, they typically last between 5 and 7 minutes from the time the first shot is fired to the last shot is fired, whether that be the individual takes their own life or they're apprehended. What ALICE is, it's an acronym, A-L-I-C-E. It's A is alert, L is lockdown, I is inform, C is counter, and E is evacuate. We'll touch upon those more later on the slideshow. But what it is, it's a research-based, proactive approach in responding to an incident of violence. It's developed by Response Options, which I'll explain who they are. They've been accepted as best practices through partnership with the Federal Department of Education, as well as the FBI. And there's others. There's a whole gamut of other agencies, New York Police Department, etc. ALICE and the Response Options is a gentleman who I've had a few occasions to meet. He's the one who certified me as an instructor. He was a military individual for years, and he's got 25, actually more than 25 years in law enforcement. As of right now, he's considered the foremost school security and active shooter specialist in the nation. He's very, very serious about what he does. He does a great job. The training was excellent that he attended. Through my own research, which I've done quite a bit, this is the state's attorney's report from the Sandy Hook incident in Newtown. And this here are statistics which I have here on the slide. Since 1991, there have been 125 school shooting incidents. And that doesn't necessarily mean within the school walls, on school property, and on a school bus, but it all is within the school day, whether it be prior to arrival, or at the end of the day with dismissal. It's all within the school day. In 2013, we've had 20 school shooting incidents. A lot of these we don't hear about unless it makes national news. If there's a mass casualty, some of them will be on the local news. But we're up to 20 this year, with number 20 being the Centennial, Colorado incident that just occurred last Friday. It's way too many, way too many. And every year, I have this here if anyone wants to look at it, every year the amount is going up. In 2012 it was 12, now we're at 20. So it's something that we really need to take another look at. Our goals. I'm going to present options. It's not anything that's going to be mandated. It's going to give our staff and students options should they find themselves in a dangerous situation. And also to enable our staff and students to make a decision that could obviously prevent death or serious injury. I have teachers even now with our current lockdown who will say, Ryan, if someone is in the building and I can get my kids out safely, am I going to get in trouble if I bring them out an exit door? They don't have a clear, what do I do if? And this is going to stop that. They're going to know exactly what they can and cannot do. What is a lockdown? This I took from our current procedure, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with our current procedures, but there's definitely a better way out there. Lock the door. That's if it locks. Cover interior windows to limit the view. Turn off the lights. Silence cell phones. Move away from the door and windows. And that's essentially it. You're waiting for an all clear. So it's hide and wait. In this picture here, this was during Virginia Tech. They had, years ago, a pretty big incident down there. And this was an actual live photo that had been taken of students in the Holden Hall when the shooting incident was in the Norris Hall, which was not even remotely that close to these students here, but they're still locked down when they had ample time to evacuate. So in that lockdown that I just described, what does it sound like the most? It resembles, obviously, freeze, which is pretty much putting everyone in a room or a safe location, or hope to be safe, and telling them to stay there, stay put. So we need to start thinking about other scenarios. What if the aggressor targets your room? You don't have time to lock the door. The door won't lock. How do we get help? What if the intruder gains entry into that room? And just a little side note, 90% of the classroom doors in the school building, they lock from the outside, not the inside. So some teachers will keep them locked all day long. Some to lock will have to take their hand out and lock them from the exterior of the room. Passive versus hard targets. What a passive target is, it's typically stationary or a still target, where a hard target would be someone that's moving. Chow at Virginia Tech killed 32 people, wounded 17. 28 of his victims were static targets. They didn't do anything. They did the traditional lockdown, they went into the corner and just waited. 4 of those 32 were hard targets that were actually attempting to elude, escape, or moving. The Columbine incident on April 20th of 1999, 52 students were in the library when Patty Nielsen, who was a teacher that came into the library, to alert them that she heard gunshots. At this time, she placed a 911 call, which I do have the audio, alerting I heard gunshots, and as she's on the phone with the 911 dispatcher, you hear her yelling to her students, get under the tables, be quiet, get under the tables, stay put. Well, 4 minutes and 10 seconds had gone by from the time she heard the firearm the gunshots, to the time Klebold and Harris actually entered that library. And in this library, we have an exit right in this far back corner. The distance is pretty equivalent to what it was in the Columbine Library. So for 4 minutes and 10 seconds, they hid under these desks, when in about 20 seconds or less, they could have been out of here. But the students were doing what they were told. They were staying under the desk to take cover. Multiple students did not listen to her and evacuated, and they are still with us today. Unfortunately, 10 students who were static targets in that library were killed, and 12 were injured. Just to give you a quick visual, this is the Columbine Library. This is where the Klebold and Harris were, the two gunmen. Patty Nielsen had the students. These are the students here under the tables. The exit was right up here. So if you notice the path, some did run out, but those that stayed were ultimately killed. Virginia Tech, this is simulating classrooms. This is a hallway. If you look at the statistics, in room 206, there were 14 present. They did no proactive lockdown. When the gunmen entered the room, 10 of them were killed, 2 of them were wounded. So 12 out of the 14. That's with doing a traditional hide in the corner. 204, 19 present. Excuse me. Present, only 2 were killed, 3 wounded, and some of those injured were actually from jumping. They jumped out of a window. Far bottom right, they chose to barricade, not just lock down, but barricade, which is a big part of the Alice. 12 present, 0 killed, 0 wounded, and so on and so forth. Elementary. This is where, once the gunman entered the building, he didn't go any further than this yellow circle here and caused all that tragedy. And the unfortunate truth is, I know a lot of people feel, well, as long as the doors are locked, it's a safe building. Yes, it can be, but this is how Adam Lanza got into the Sandy Hook Elementary School. He shot right through the lobby door and made his way in. Those are actual pictures. It was 6 minutes from the time he fired the first shot to the last shot, which was thought to be his suicide shot, where he killed himself. And in that, there were 20 students and 6 teachers killed in that 6-minute period. So Greg Crane, the founder of Response Options, came up with this quote: "We leave the building in the event of a fire, but when it comes to an active shooter, we lock everyone in." He has a point there. So what is the right way? There is no right or wrong way. But we can't let the intruder's plan work. We have to prepare ourselves, our students, our staff. In the current emergency protocols, lockdown protocols, it doesn't allow for staff or students to use their phones and call 911. Throughout many districts, it's the same way. It's administrator or designee. Well, you're limiting your communication if you just have a small group of people that announce. It could be someone, God forbid, comes through the back of the building. Administration's usually up front. Why can't they call? So we need to start letting other people place these calls. Typically, I will be in the school, but my responding officers that are coming as backup, the 911 dispatcher can let them know the updates. hiding under the tables, desks in the corner, as the typical lockdown states. Just providing for easy targets. It's not effective. So starting into the ALICE, the A-L-I-C-E. So in alert, we're gonna be calling 911 as soon as possible. We're gonna be making the announcement of lockdown. However, we're gonna be adding something. More knowledge. We're gonna announce what we know. Instead of lockdown, the whole building locks down. Lockdown, if we know that there's a shooter outside of the main office, we're gonna say that. Lockdown, there's a shooter outside of the main office. So everyone in the school knows exactly where that threat is at that point. We can't always rely on the intercom system. As we know, the beginning of the year, it was down for a few days. So we have to think outside of the box. We saw email. Good majority of staff have two-way radios. You know, we can yell, we can use blowhorns that we have. So we always need to think. You know, if we go to use the intercom, it doesn't work. We need to be prepared for that. We're no longer using codes. Code red, code yellow, code green. Those are a thing of the past. It's a lockdown. So not only with the lockdown, there's lockdown and barricade. So we're not just closing the door, locking the door, what I read to you earlier. If we do go further with this, I'll be training them how to actually lock down better, safer. This door right here, it's the breakaway bars, the exit. We would have to go outside to lock the door. However, right now, if this room was full of students, I know most of them probably wearing a belt. You can wrap a belt around those two posts that come down or the actual handles. And it is glass, so people could argue, well, you can shoot out the glass. You could, but it's going to slow them down. They're not going to want to, through history, they're not going to try putting that much effort. They're going to keep going. Because what they want is they want high numbers. They want a high kill rate. So if we can slow them down and discourage them, that's a big thing. In our current lockdown, the kids would all just go in the corner of the library. They wouldn't think about trying to lock that door from the inside. Not all doors lock. Just like I said, there's the belt. If a door opens outward, it's another thing I'll train the staff and students on. Keeping the aggressor out of your safe area and giving us time to get to the threat. Just some pictures I grabbed. You know, just adding, putting anything you can in front of the doorway. If the doorway opens out, there's techniques. One that I just showed you. Again, I'm not saying it's foolproof, but it's definitely going to slow them down. And that's what we want. Tables, chairs, furniture, anything heavy. We don't have any hydraulic assist, but cover the door window if you can. That's in our current protocol. After barricading the door, we're still going to have them move quickly into an area. Here's the big part here, is they're not just going to sit in the area. When that time comes, if they can't evacuate, and they're going to barricade, they need to make a plan. Instead of just sitting there waiting for the all clear, waiting for the threat to go away, they need to go to the next step. They need to have a plan. The teachers, staff, they all need to kind of get on the same page and come up with the same plan. The aggressor comes into that area, starts shooting at the door, climbs over barricaded items. Well, if he's in that safe spot, that's when we're going to move into our next evolution of the ALICE. We'll allow students, depending on the grade level, to grab books, book bags, and anything in that room that can be a projectile. We're going to let them arm themselves with that in case someone crosses that threshold into their safe area. This is more for staff. We won't do that this evening. Inform, the I in ALICE, it's similar to the alert. We want to try to keep play-by-play where the intruder is in the building. There is capability on the phone system that you can dial an extension and open up the public address system. So if there was a teacher in the back hallway, he could open it up and announce, the shooter just walked by room 142. The whole school knows. We unfortunately don't have many cameras, so it's tough to see exactly where they are. But that is, another way we could do it without the camera system is let people patch in and give announcements. Another part of the form is updating the police. Allow them to use their phones. Allow them to call 911, because they'll know when they're arriving exactly where to go in the school, where the threat is. There's some just examples at the bottom there. I just heard 3 gunshots by the library. Just informing, keeping them informed. With the updated information, it can better help other areas of the school make their decision. So if there was an intruder, an announcement comes over that he is by the library, or 3 shots were heard by the library. In the back wing or the other side of the school, if they hear that, it gives them a chance to evacuate. And the C in the Alice is counter, distracting and disarming. Like I said, they're going to have a plan and be ready to act if someone comes into their area. They're going to communicate with the others in their room, the classmates, the teachers. The teacher is going to need to try to have the direction. If someone does break the threshold, they're going to counter the attack. I know this is controversial at times, but there's strength in numbers, and we're not training them to fight. If someone comes into their classroom with a firearm, we know that it's probably not going to end well. So this is just giving them the option to try to combat or distract the active shooter. Everyone requires an action called an OODA loop. It's observe, orient, decide, act. It's even someone with a firearm. When I went through the training, I had a fake firearm, and I had the trainees throw objects at me. And I don't care how trained you are, natural reaction if something's coming towards your face or your head. You're moving, you're ducking, you're trying to get out of the way. And that's buying time because the intruder isn't focusing on his target. He's trying to move out of the way of what's getting thrown at him. Just screaming, yelling, like I said, throwing items. If they can, attack him. If they can overpower him. If it's going to be their life or attempt to live, by all means, I'd like to give them that option. And we'll get into more with the training. I'm not going to teach them how to fight. It's just easy techniques that are easy to remember. Setting up an attack team in a perfect situation. If there were 5 people that could do it, 1 person per appendage, but it's just working with what you have. And also train them, if they do subdue the shooter and the firearm is dislodged, on how to secure that firearm while police are incoming, because if someone picks up that firearm, they're not going to know the difference if that's the active shooter, a student. So we talk about securing the weapon. Every classroom has a trash barrel, just getting it out of the way, putting the trash barrel over it. I don't care if they sit on it, if they guard it. Evacuate, which is a big part. Not all situations will allow for it. If someone comes in and they happen to be right outside of a classroom door, we don't want people leaving that classroom. It's a danger zone. That's the point where they would lock down, barricade. But if we do know where they are, a lot of the other portion of the school is not affected, and they can have that option to evacuate and get out of the danger area. I've had the question, well, what are we going to do with all these students running out of the building? We'll have a plan, a relay point, but even if it doesn't go 100%, safety takes precedent over accountability as far as I'm concerned. We'll get them, we'll find them, out safe. Some repetitive stuff. It's another question I threw in there. Well, what about a second shooter? In all of the incidents reported, only 2% was there a second shooter. And they weren't standing. One was not out inside, one outside. Is it a possibility? I guess anything is a possibility. But going from what we know, past history with this, I feel it's going to be a lot safer to have them exit the building than stay in the building, which is the danger zone. This here is a schematic of Aponequid. So as of right now, the announcement, lockdown, lockdown. The whole school goes into lockdown. This is the main first floor, this is the second floor here to the bottom left. With the new Alice announcement, lockdown, lockdown, adding the gunman outside the main office. What I did was I highlighted in the red every exit in the building on the first floor. So what I did is I put a circle. This is your immediate danger area. Okay. Why should the whole entire school go into lockdown if we know, and if they specifically announce where that shooter's location is? All these people towards the back, on the sides, they can evacuate. This is just a sample of an evacuation plan or a rally point. I also put some other safe zones. Baker Lane, which is on the other side of these tree lines here, it's a residential neighborhood. You know, that's something that we get into if we implement it, but as long as they're somewhere safe, we'll find them and we'll worry about the accountability after the safety. Talking about some decision making, dial 911, lockdown or evacuate. Lockdown, always have the what if, always be prepared. Question has also been raised, well, what about liability? Well, there's two samples here. We mandate through policy that the occupants sit passively and wait for help. Or, if we go with the Alice, we provide a range of options and communications in order for occupants to make a decision as to their best action to take given the circumstances they face. This is just something I took from Department of Homeland Security. This isn't necessarily for a school. This is a pretty broad, it could be a business. There's here, evacuate, hide out, take action. Very similar to the Alice. Almost done. There's also other skills that I would incorporate into the training about breaking the window. Where on the window is your target if they want to break it? The swarm, which is if staff and students, this person is going to come into their zone with a firearm or a weapon, allowing them and teaching them how to attack. Keep in contact with us, the law enforcement, and even simple tips of controlling bleeding. And obviously something as big as taking down an active shooter or a violent intruder, it would be geared for the grades. So it would be presented differently to, say, the K through 3rd grade than it would the middle school and into the high school. So in the elementary schools, it'd be, you know, adding the movement, noise, allowing the evacuation. 4th and 5th, the middle school going to add the swarm technique, try to disarm, overcome. In the high school, you have your full instruction. And just in closing, I threw this in here. In no way are we asking or teaching our students or staff to make any attempt to subdue an armed gunman outside of their secure area. However, we will provide them with the knowledge that if faced with a life or death situation, there are methods that can be applied to greatly enhance their chance of survival. The methods will be taught in the event they are directly confronted by an armed gunman. Just the bottom piece here is just causing distractions, causing much chaos. Don't be a stationary target, whereas the hard target, passive target that I spoke about prior. So there's a lot to it, but in the training I've done, I trained a school in Middleborough, and they were a little reluctant at first, but once we did the training, I locked them down traditionally, and then I locked them down with Alice, and they were all true believers after we were done with the training. Question? It's a lot in a short amount of time.
Any questions from anybody in the committee?
Certainly is a lot to absorb right off the bat. And,
First off, I'd like to thank you, Officer Maltese, for that great presentation. I'd like to thank and acknowledge the members of the Lakeville and Freetown Police Department here that are in support of this program. I think it's definitely something that we have to, as painful as it is, to look at and to do. If we've learned any lessons from September 11th, 2001, we don't know the total lives that flight 93 that crashed in Pennsylvania, because they decided to act rather than sit and be passive, safe, So I think it's my own support. You have my full support of it.
I know that in some of the three incidents that you mentioned, that there's some confusion on the outside as to who's in charge. If you're gonna get this place to be swarmed by police from different areas, including the state police, is there a plan in place so that surrounding departments know who's going to be giving orders and who's going to control the situation?
Yes, the Lakeville Police have protocols in place for responding units, addresses incident command, staging areas, the medical aspect of getting medical units in and out, where parents would be staged. So that has been addressed on our end.
And the surrounding departments are aware of that and are on board with that?
Well, if it's something that goes forward, we have to have the area departments on board. What would happen in a case right now, if God forbid a tragedy happened, when they arrive, they would report to our staging area and then take direction from there.
Any other questions from?
what type of action does the committee need to take on, Mr. Chair?
We just need to give the superintendent direction on how to proceed.
If the committee, I wanted, obviously, this is a shift, if you will, in thinking. It certainly comes with a shift on the national level. I mean, Alice is not an alternative, it's another option to lockdowns. And it certainly is in keeping with what we have read from the federal government as a result of learning the lessons. No one, to watch that is pretty painful for people, I think. As I was sitting here thinking about it, and no one ever wants to walk in those shoes, but at the very least, we need to give our staff, our administrators, our students, every skill that they can have. And if this will enhance that, I think it's important. I wanted you to have this information. Area schools are doing this training. I most recently read about this happening in Old Rochester. If you go to the Wilmington Public Schools, they have Alice FAQs on their website. I would think, based on my discussions with Officer Maltese, that you would be one of the first districts one of the earliest districts to begin to look at this. I do not think this is anything that is to be taken lightly. I think that we wanted you to hear about this first. I would present to our entire administrative council in January. We would then present in small groups to our faculty so they get a general understanding of what this is like. We would hold a parent informational session sometime, probably in February or so, and then if all things feel comfortable and good, then we would certainly move forward to see how we would begin to train our staff. And I would hope that we could have that training done before the end of the year. And that certainly coincides with some discussions that we'll be having in the future around budgetary numbers that I'm looking to present to you that includes some additional continuing security upgrades that came out of the risk assessment that the committee has seen and saw last June. So, it's part and parcel of all. Last week in the superintendent's corner, I took the opportunity, knowing that Officer Maltese would be here this evening, to give a little bit of a background information for people who couldn't be here this evening. We will take his PowerPoint and put it on the website. There's a lot of good information in that, so we'll have that posted for people as early as tomorrow. And I think it's the beginning of, again, kind of a new standard, if you will, albeit a standard that we hope that we will never, ever have to use. But I think better to be safe.
I know there's a fiscal piece to this, but is there a consensus on the advantage of having an armed officer in each school building? Is there a nationwide consensus, or?
Well, up until the last incident in Colorado, no school with an SRO in it had been targeted. That was the first incident. The advantage, with me being in the high school the majority of the time, I'm still going to be probably a lot closer than a responding cruiser to one of these other schools if it happened. I would say that there is an advantage to it.
I heard Officer Maltese's presentation. Thank you very much for that. I wouldn't even for a second pretend to know better than the experts. And certainly Officer Maltese is an expert in the law enforcement community whom we're charged with keeping us safe, for saying this is a good idea. I would like to certainly, I don't know if you need a vote, but offer my support that we go forward with this. But I would like to see kind of a little bit hard timeline. That way, we're assured we're not going to lose track of this.
Sure.
So I would like to, lay some sort of framework down where we're creating and meeting milestones to ensure that this does go smoothly.
Okay.
And an update on every agenda on
Sure.
progress.
We can do that. We talked in very general terms, beginning with this evening, and I outlined for you very generally, the pieces that we need to go forward as far as bringing in more constituents and giving them more information. And then at that point, we would then look at that, but we can put that together for you easily. Thank you.
Thank you very much again.
Also want to thank the two chiefs who we reached out to, and they certainly, I believe, recognize this, and the officers who are here this evening also. I can tell you that I work very closely with Officer Maltese. A lot of times it's doing bus runs and looking at moving bus stops, so I get an opportunity to ride around and have a lot of conversations. We were fortunate to attend a seminar on violence in the school districts and managing threat situations. So we've had those opportunities to have that discussion, and it's a pretty serious topic, safety in schools, regardless of whether it's an intruder or any other ways. One of the things that we most recently had a conversation about is a new product that's out there on the market. You probably saw the picture at Newtown, recognized how the intruder was able to shoot his way in. There is a product that Officer Maltese brought to our attention that's out there that actually, they tell me, stops bullets, and it's a film, adhesive film that's applied to glass. And we actually are beginning to I've asked for us to look into that, because I do think that anything that we can do as an advantage to help us is going to be an advantage for us. So constantly new things are happening, protocols are changing, so these are things that Officer Maltese has been able to bring back to us in a very short period of time. So I thank him.
Do we have the consensus of the committee? We want to move this forward.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Officer Maltese. I appreciate your hard work.
Thank you all.
Just as an aside, Officer Maltese had the hard part of having to me edit his work, and as a former English teacher, you never forget that red pencil. So I thank him for putting up with me. Everything he gave me, I circled and put. And he was pretty good at that when he came back and got
From
it.
the Department of Justice.
So I thank you. Thank you for putting up with me on that. Old habits die hard sometimes, I think.
agenda, we have community speak limited to those items that are on the agenda. Do we have anybody?
No anymore. I can't idly sit by. I have to I have to speak to school age and how you are wavering the age for certain children. Freetown, Lakeville, we were one of the last towns that have rolled back the age limit. And we did that slowly so the community could adjust to the age limit. It was done over a period of years. And I know in the past there have been requests that have come forward to waive the age limit for other children, and they were always denied. The one thing you have to think about, I know you said, oh, 8 hours is not that big a discrepancy, but you have to think of the whole picture. The child entering kindergarten at age 4 will be in a classroom with children who are at least a year or more older. And there is a big discrepancy between children as far as gross motor, fine motor, and even emotional. So, for you to take, I just feel that you took it very lightly, that the request was made and, oh, it's only 8 hours. But there is a big discrepancy between a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, and children who are turning 6 in kindergarten. And the requirements in kindergarten are very academic. You're asking children to really do a lot of fine motor activities, which a 4-year-old has not the capabilities of meeting those goals. So I would just like you to consider that when you're arbitrarily making these decisions, that there is a big difference between a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, and children who are turning 6 in kindergarten. And now that you've done this for one student, then there are other parents in the community who have 4-year-olds that will be hearing of this, and they will be coming forward to ask. So is it your intent that whoever comes forward now and asks that the age requirement be waived, that you will do that?
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Anyone else for community speaks? Next on the agenda, we have new business, superintendent's update.
Thank you. I'd like to update you this evening, and actually it's a good lead into our technology.
Acceptance of minutes?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Because we don't ever have any, so thank you for reminding me.
You have minutes.
We have 2 of them.
I'll be them old.
Okay. We have some acceptance of minutes.
Sure.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion for the start of the acceptance of the minutes.
I move that we accept the minutes dated 11/14/12 of the Freetown Lakeville Regional School Committee, Wednesday, 11/14/2012.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay.
I would,
Wait. Oh, wait, 2012?
Yeah,
Or you actually abstained?
okay, so motion carries.
Yeah.
extension.
Count.
All right, I would move that we accept the minutes dated February 13, 2013 of the joint boards, well, no, we'll just be doing the Freetown Lakeville Regional School Committee portion, but it was a joint board of Freetown Lakeville Regional School Committee, Regional Finance Committee, and Freetown Lakeville Boards of Selectmen.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Okay. Next. I would move, I move that we accept the
Meeting minutes of the Freetown Lakeville Regional School Committee, Wednesday, June 5, 2013.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
First, special or regular, because there's two.
Special, he said.
Okay, the special is the one I have the question on.
Okay.
That meeting essentially was called to go into executive session,
Okay.
and the executive matter is printed in these minutes, and I don't think we've disposed of that matter as of yet, so I don't believe that these minutes should be approved at this time.
Do I hear a motion to table approval of those minutes?
Oh, you are my motion.
Okay. So we won't approve them. Okay, so 6/5/2013 regular meeting.
Okay, no, I see his point, okay, very
Yeah.
good, okay. All right, then I move to, that we vote to accept the minutes of the Freetown Lakeville Regional School Committee regular meeting on June 5th, 2013.
Second.
Motion and a second, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, and last but certainly not least.
Okay, I move that we vote to accept the meeting minutes of the Freetown Lakeville Regional School Committee on Wednesday, June 19th, 2013.
Second.
Second, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
My comment about us not having any minutes to approve, no question on the current recording secretary. With changing recording secretaries, we've gone through 3 in the past 12 months, I believe, so unfortunately, there's been some stuff that's been lagging, but we'll do better, and we'll get it straightened out going forward. So we'll have the minutes on a timely manner to be approved, available for whom each act requires. Thank you. Okay, now on to new business.
Thank you.
Superintendent's updates.
Thank
We
you.
have no old business.
This evening, I'd like to update the committee on the PARC. PARC is the acronym for the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers, and as you know, this assessment will eventually replace MCAS assessment. The commissioner, and I've enclosed in your packet the commissioner's November 27th letter to all superintendents and charter school leaders, and I'm sure that you've reviewed it, but for the benefit of the community and also for the benefit of the members of the committee, I'd like to just make a few highlights as to questions that we get asked around, why move from MCAS to PARC assessment. The premise behind that certainly was based on the fact that Massachusetts adopted the Common Core standards, which are as close as one would get, and that was in 2010, to national standards, if you will, and those were in English language arts and mathematics. That really led to the need to refine and change, obviously, MCAS assessments, which were specific to Massachusetts, to more of a national assessment, and I use that and put that word in quotation marks because PARC is not nationwide at this point. So PARC assessments really have come out of that background of adoption. And as some people have pointed out, there is legal authority for movement to PARC assessment. It comes under the state law that authorizes the Board of Education to make sure that it develops procedures to annually evaluate the performance of schools, districts in the state of Massachusetts, and to develop procedures to update and improve them. And so, although we know that certainly those of us who've been living with MCAS for many years know that our system certainly is looked upon as one of the toughest assessments in the country. Our students typically place first, if you will, overall in the NAEP assessment, which is the closest you get to a national assessment. Our students in Massachusetts typically place first in math and English. The governor, all the governors continually point to that as being education governors, as we know. So, having said that, PARC assessments are going to be field tested in small clusters this year and will be implemented in the entire districts in the next school year. In November of this year, the Board of Education voted to do a 2-year trial of PARC. So although we're doing a 2-year trial, I don't think any of us think that it's going to go away. But it is a 2-year trial, and they're very quick to point out. This year, small pilot groups, and I'll talk in a minute about which schools in our district have been selected and for what and when. We call it field testing this year in 13-14, and next year, operationally, we'll be testing our students in PARC, which is an online assessment in grades 3 through 8. Now, the caveat is that through 2018, students will have their competency determination still continue to be through MCAS. So in grade 10, those students through 2018, so that we're transitioning into this. But after that, unless the Board of Education votes differently, it will not happen. I think it's interesting to point out on page 2 that the Commissioner talks about support for districts. I wish I could sit here in front of you today and say that there's monetary support for the hardware that school districts are going to need, but there is not. We have not seen any of that. Your district has really positioned itself very well in that you have upgraded your infrastructure to allow us the opportunity when that happens for all of our students to use and take use devices that we will provide to them in 2015, 16, and beyond. So there is no support. In fact, they have not come out yet with any of the letters that we would be sending out to parents about field testing. A couple of things I want to mention. There were 800 schools that were selected to field test using computers. We were one of those schools. In fact, we have 2 schools that will be field testing this year, Grace and the high school. We'll be field testing in both what they call PBAs, performance-based assessment, and EOYs, end-of-year assessments. So we need to get used to the fact that there'll be multiple assessments for students in PARC. At Grace in grades 4 and 5, a field test group of approximately 40 students will be tested in mathematics. Some of you may have heard about the fact that there was an opportunity to opt out of MCAS testing if you were selected to field test PARC. That's partly correct. You could opt out, or you can opt out, if you were selected for a performance-based assessment, because the time frame somewhat overlaps the time frame for some of the assessments in MCAS. However, there are a number of concerns about that. What happens if you opt out to your results in MCAS? The state offered a few answers to that. I think there weren't many superintendents and curriculum leaders and assistant superintendents and school committee members who felt comfortable. One option was that the state would determine whether or not the students who were field testing represented the typical student in MCAS, and the results then would either, decision on the part of the state, either be used or not used with respect to MCAS reporting. Or you could make the decision based on the fact that you would send criteria into them, data into them about these students, and we would make a decision as to whether or not we would include or not include. It's somewhat confusing. In the end, they sent a survey, and to no surprise, of 70% of the school districts said they were either decided to test both or were leaning to test both. There was enough of a time frame between them. So we needed to just make a decision, and we needed to send that decision in by December 6th to the state. We only had one grade that fit that category of PBA, and that was our grade 4. In consultation with the principal and looking at the calendar of when the test would take place, we felt comfortable that there would be enough distance and that the teachers and I think the principal felt that the conflict would be avoided in the sense that the time frame is about a month between the testing. So there would be approximately 40 students, and we would much rather have those students participate and get results that we use, that data that we use for our students. Because if you opt out, there are no results for Park. So there's no student result, there's no school result, there's no district, obviously, result. So we felt that, given that, and given the fact that roughly 70% of the districts were leaning toward that, or had made the decision, that our decision was probably in keeping with what most people felt was good for students, and also good, certainly, for us in getting more information. Part of the discussion is wrapped around future needs and present needs. And this leads into really the next item of business, and that's a recommendation for technology purchasing this year. We were able to, initially when we received the background information about can you participate in online Park, we had to then determine whether we could. We had to look at the infrastructure. I didn't. Director of Technology did. Here he is. He looked at it, and he had to fill out this sheet and send back and say yes or no. So we determined yes, obviously, we could. We had the infrastructure in place to be able to support what they needed with respect to bandwidth and all of those other kinds of things. So we reviewed the technology guidelines for our hardware operating systems, for our tech specifications. We responded to that. Of course, the next thing is you need to have devices in people's hands. We're looking at approximately 40 plus students in grades 4 and 5, respectively, 2 classrooms at the high school level. Barbara's not here, but their testing is in Algebra 1, and that's that's 4 classes and 4 classes in ELA. So by the time we looked at both, we were looking at the need to be able to have approximately, I think it was over 100 devices, roughly, between both that we would need. It's interesting because when you attend any of their seminars, DESE tends not to get into some of the pieces that are questions that we all have, like how do we do this? How do we make this happen, knowing that we may not have the devices that our students need? And even though we have some time to do that, remember this year we agreed that we would participate online because I believe, and I think in talking with principals, we all said the same thing. We want to model and field test it as close as possible to the real thing. Why would we wait until the following year? Let's get the glitches out. Let's look at what we've got. Let's make some decisions. So we received some information in PowerPoints and sessions that I attended and others attended about things such as resources, power strips, battery adapters, extension cords, headphones, earbuds for every student, external keyboards for devices, training for support staff who need to be in the building when you're doing this so that if there are glitches, the teacher is not doing that and fixing that. District support for testing days, extra computers per testing session. Those are just some of the what I call technical pieces. We also had a long list of security procedures, which got us thinking as we walked around to our facilities as they exist right now in Grace and at the high school. Students sitting in every other seat. Arranged monitors back to back. Seat students back to back. Seat students in a semicircle. Now, if you've been into some of our labs, that's going to be a little tricky to do. Have physical or visual barriers for the validity of the test. Seat students in widely spaced rows. So those were some of the important notes that they suggest we consider. Just as we got a list of pages of things about security and MCAS over the years that I think teachers and staff just have memorized as to what to do with them, we will get that list eventually. So I'm here to update you this evening on that, but also to bring a recommendation forward to you. We are going to pilot, and whether or not you authorize us to move forward with doing some expenditures this evening, we'll make it work. We'll make it work somehow. It may not be the best way, but it will work. So that's my update on Park. Park assessments for us will be starting in March. We're looking we have a window of time for field testing. The PBAs, they come at the end of March. That's one of the reasons why we're here, obviously, at this meeting, to ask you to consider a recommendation for some technology. And I know that you have that in your packet, so I will stop at this point. You can certainly ask me any questions about Park that I can answer. Dr. Dunning has been involved, so she can answer some of those. But then, if there are none, or when you are finished, we'll turn it over to Craig McAma about the technology piece that we're looking for.
Any questions from anybody? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Dr. Nash. This is just actually a brief presentation on that handout about the potential for a device we could use to both satisfy Park testing and also take advantage of the cloud we just built, right? We spent all that money on our infrastructure. We're looking to get a device. This is a potential for that. But before I start with that, I gotta say, and I didn't plan it, what great advocates those third graders were for technology in a classroom. And I couldn't have asked for a better presentation to say.
You didn't thank Mr. LaBelle.
We need to get devices in front of kids and really take off with that. So, having said that, I really have two goals for the idea of purchasing devices. And obviously one is to satisfy Park testing, but the other one is to start piloting this cloud we built. And you know, we wouldn't buy these devices just for Park testing that happens once a year. They would be actually integrated into the curriculum. Right now, they'd be positioned at a couple of the schools that do have to do Park testing. But we plan on, as the years go by, purchasing more and more devices and eventually getting in the hands of more students. One of the things we've been looking into is this Chromebook, and this is an example of it. This is about a year and a half old model. It's more of an internet appliance, they call it, because what it allows you to do is connect to clouds. So think of Google Apps for Education as a cloud that you can connect to with this device. Or think of our Freelake cloud that you can connect to access resources here. That's really what this device does. It's not a computer that can run programs locally. And so that's really just an internet device. That really is why it's less expensive than a full-blown laptop. So this model right here is about a $250 model. If we went into a laptop or even a desktop model, you'd be $500 at least for that. So that's one of the advantages of something like this. We would look for 2 pods, I'm calling them, or 2 carts of 32 each at these 2 schools. What it would also, the Chromebook here would also allow us to do a couple other things. And one is, we are required by the Children's Internet Protection Act to filter our web access so that kids just can't go anywhere. We limit where they can go. This device can integrate with our internet service providers, firewall and content filter, and this device can actually be filtered from home. So if a kid took this home, they would actually be filtered through our school system here. So that's a big, big advantage. We're required to do that. If we don't, we forfeit E-rate funds for technology purchases. So that's a big, big advantage of this. I think one of the things we want to do too is this device proper for the cloud we built, for the infrastructure we put together? And so that's what we're really looking to do, is purchase a bunch of these, see if our wireless is going to handle it, see if we can deal with the bandwidth that we have in place. You know, that's one of the questions, and Dr. Nash touched on that, where Park has laid out a lot of different requirements for the device itself, for the proctors watching the test what happens, for the technology staff to be available, for power requirements. So there's a lot of things where we need to really pilot and test bed here. And unless we have these devices in our hands, we're not going to be able to do something like that. We really need to start thinking about what do we get in the student hands, and what's the most effective device as far as cost and its abilities. So that's just a brief overview of what we're asking for here, and I think you have a handout in your packet. So if there's any questions about the technology part, I can answer that.
Let me kind of bring this back to pieces together in a bigger sense. A couple of things. I don't want to get people to think that this is being driven by Park alone. It isn't. I think Craig points that out. We've been meeting back in the early fall and talking about the big picture, the plan, the 3-year plan for technology. So now that you have infrastructure, you know, Park helps us, let's be real about this, to jumpstart that, because there are some requirements there. However, having said that, Craig has met with our Executive Ed Council. I've been meeting with Craig. He was here this week when we knew that Park assessment was a reality for us. The 2 building principals and Craig and I had a discussion about, wouldn't it be great if we could use devices, mobile devices, instead of trying to figure out what we're going to do with what we've got right now, since the goal at the end of 3 years from the administrative team is that we put a device in every student's hand and in every faculty member's hand. I mean, that's our long-term goal in the plan. What that looks like, whether those carts become carts that we put into elementary schools because we make the determination a little differently, has to be worked out. But this purchase fits into that bigger plan, that 3-year plan, and you'll get presented that capital plan. That's part of what Craig's working on. But this really helps to jumpstart it, and you'll see in the budget that we present to you in January that there's some more money component of that. This is separate from whether or not a capital plan gets approved. But there's a need to take the $900,000 certainly and to build off of that. You've heard about the age of your devices. Certainly, you're going to want to upgrade that. Chromebooks are one device that allows us that. It allows us an opportunity to test that, to pilot it. The principals looked at these, felt that they were appropriate for our students at different levels. We have thought about COT, security, all of those kinds of things. And this is really, I think, a piece of the larger puzzle. So I don't want you to think that we're just purchasing because we're saying Park. I'm not saying that. But certainly it will help us as we move forward to eventually do what needs to be done, which is to have all students be able to take the assessment online. And I also forgot the most important part, because you should be asking this: how would we fund this? So at this point, I do need to turn it over to Fred Baker, and he'll explain to you, because I think it will. Sure.
Just one thing that you said is sticking with me. This is an experiment?
No, which device we choose to use in our environment is being piloted. So it may not be a Chromebook that we go with, but we want to get some Chromebooks in here and see what they do to satisfy our needs.
Yeah.
Right?
If I may,
yeah.
There are other school districts in the area that are currently using these, and Craig tonight received an invitation to come and see them using them. So there are other districts that have already.
Right. That's fine. I just want to make sure I understood what I heard, and I'm not sure that I still do. We purchase a device. We know when we've made that purchase that device will work for us.
Right.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. We may choose after buying, realistically, 4 carts. You are making a purchase of 4 carts, that we go to something different, but those carts will still be used.
Buying 4 carts and going that.
No.
No good.
No.
Okay.
No, we talked about that, and what if we didn't like them, where would those go, and what we talked to the elementary principals.
Right. This is the experiment.
Great.
Right.
That makes me feel better.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, clarify.
In fact, just one more thing. I'm attending a webinar, right, which is an online seminar about using Chromebooks to satisfy Park testing.
1 o'clock.
Yes, 1 o'clock tomorrow, right?
I will see you there.
Yes, virtually. So.
I'm not sure if I'm seeing this correctly, but this presentation of these first few pods and the talk about buying more and what device, that seems to be completely opposite of what we were presented when we went forward with the technology upgrade, debt exclusion, and convinced the towns to go forward with that. I believe the president of Hub Technology, Hub was the successful bidder, correct? In this very room, walked around with an iPhone that he clipped into a keyboard and several other. He looked at my tablet and he said, "Your tablet will work on that system." that there were firewall protections and the whole deal. And one of the selling points was that any device will work on that system. Now we seem to be saying we have to pilot and test and select one device, and it sounds to me like we're heading down the road of buying a device for every student. That's completely different than what the school committee,
Bring your own device.
the school committee was discussing last year.
I mean, I can speak to that, right?
And then I'll comment too.
The private cloud will allow any device to connect and take advantage of it. In fact, I have my phone and I can connect to the private cloud with this. This serves two goals, right? We gotta get some devices for part testing, and this is an inexpensive device that we can use on our private cloud, right? So that satisfies kind of two aspects of that. Now, the presentation about the project didn't really talk about the end devices, right? We talked about the infrastructure, the virtual servers that we set up, the wireless, all those things that any device could be used to attach to that. Dr. Dunning and I are in discussions about appropriate uses for even a device like this in the classroom. So we're not dismissing any device. The special education department has rolled out how many iPads?
30 this year.
30 iPads this year. So that's another device that can connect to our cloud and provide educational benefits to our students. So we're not just saying this is the device and that's all we're going to do. We can also use some of our old equipment to access our cloud, and we're doing that now. We've piloted that in the guidance department of both the middle school and high school, where they're just using their plain old regular desktop computer and accessing our cloud that way too. So we've explored many ways to do this. My task was, what device can we use to satisfy park testing, and will that work on our cloud also? So this is what we're concentrating on now. I like this device, personal preference. I've used this for almost a year now in our system here, and it works great. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Through the chair, I appreciate that additional information. My concerns are still the same, that if we're gonna change and go in a different direction, these pods sound like the first step towards a large capital expense that we really didn't present to the public in concept, when we went for the infrastructure override. So I just want to be careful, and I want to learn a lot more about what we're doing here, and the public has a certain perception. I think we're.
If I may speak, only because I am very familiar with the park testing, as Craig is, as well as the superintendent and Dr. Dunning is, you have to have the ability to lock the device down during the testing. And with a privately owned device, we don't, even if they're on Free Lakes Cloud, we don't really have the ability to thoroughly lock that device down. If a kid brought in an iPad, for example, that had Verizon 3G wireless on it, they could theoretically get out on Verizon's cloud, and not that any of our kids would do this, but circumvent the test.
Okay, no, and that's good information. But let's go back to when we were talking about technology last year. Now, were Parks on the horizon at this point?
Park was on the horizon, but it was just on the horizon, and they didn't have any real clear information, which they still don't do 100%. Yeah, I would say they probably got, 75, 80% of the information out there.
So we're reacting to a little bit of the change, so I can understand that. But Parks is requiring the district's purchase?
No, they're not requiring anything. They're requiring what we talked about earlier,
Right.
about security and about devices down the road. We know this. We know you can't use certain things like iPads and things like that, small devices. We know that, as Bob pointed out, that they have to be secure. I think we're looking at two things.
They are, yeah, they're saying districts are
They're
going to
not
have
gonna
to
tell
provide
me
devices
that.
for all the students to be able to take these exams.
They're not telling you that, but it's another.
And when you're told that you need to physically put barriers in place for students for test security and all of that, you've got to figure out how you do that in a laboratory setting, or you've got to change the spacing of your computers. That's not easy to do in a lockdown lab. So I think what my hunch is that when Hub Tech was here, we were at a different point. Than we are now. And there still is opportunities for students, and still will be, to bring other types of personal devices in. we're trying to jumpstart and address some of the issues. You're going to have to buy some kind of banks of some kind of portable devices, if you will, Chromebooks or something, to have in buildings for testing. Think about this. At middle school, every grade is tested. We were just thinking logistically, if you allowed us to go ahead with this purchase, the high school needs 120 at once. Grace would have enough in 2 carts. Those carts are not light, we know, they're a little heavy, but they actually have to be moved over here for us to give flexibility, portability, security, and all the things that we probably want to pilot this year before they tell us you're not doing it the right way. So to some degree, the answer is yes and no, because their state is never going to tell us. But yet we call it another unfunded mandate, most of us in the business. But probably it is a little bit different than when Hub Tech was here. I wasn't here for that presentation. And there is a little bit of a shift, so you are correct in saying that.
I think, if I recall from that time, it was pretty clearly given to us that this was money for an infrastructure upgrade, and that there would be other costs forthcoming, and that there would be the need to eventually replace computers at the schools. So I'm not surprised at all by this, because at the time it was specifically that amount of money for infrastructure. Because people would come to me and say, why are you spending all this money on these computers? And I'm like, actually, it's not about the computers, it's about the servers and the bandwidth and the connectivity and the APs for wireless and things like that. So I'm not surprised that we're talking about this right now.
I just want to piggyback off of
Sure.
that. And I know the statement was, if we build this infrastructure, the device you purchase is going to be less costly in the long run, right? That was one of the ideas behind investing in that infrastructure and what we did. Because now we can take an internet appliance rather than a full computer or a smaller device. iPads are expensive, I can't put that as an example, but you see what I'm saying. This is a $250 device versus a $500 laptop or a desktop. My statement back in those days was, by investing now, you're going to save about 50% in the long run for any other purchases for end equipment.
Absolutely.
No, I guess that's, that kind of answered one of the questions. I would just say, there were a lot of discussions concerning, bring your own device, and it's been quiet on that topic.
I can just say one comment about that is you run into, especially if you're using a bring your own device for part testing, you run into the inequality issue, right? So a student has a device, some parent claims that my student didn't have an adequate device, so therefore the test he took, right, could be in controversy. So that's one of the issues we've been, theoretically dealing with, right? And there's been examples of, I want to say it was one of the school districts up along 495. I sent you an article about that, right, where the school issues, was it Burlington or the school?
Northborough, Southborough.
Yeah, where the school issued devices like, no, they required the parents to purchase the device, wasn't it?
Yes.
And the idea was they flipped the classroom, just like we saw with the 3rd graders tonight. And a parent said, well, wait a minute, if you're requiring my student to take this home like a textbook, you need to provide me that textbook for no cost. And so they got into those issues. So we've in theory, have started saying, well, is it BYOD, or do we fund our own technology and make equity proper? So we've had those theoretical discussions, Dr. Nash and I, and several other members here of the Ad Council, and so we debate those things all the time. We really look at that and say, where are we going to go with this? Now, I don't dismiss bring your own device, and in fact, I think this is the bring your own device. Every kid has one of these, right? And there's no extra cost for a parent. Every kid's got a smartphone. You bring this in. I have a little app on here that does like the clicker program, where a teacher can set up a series of questions, like a little quiz, and the students for no charge can download the app to their device and do a little program here. So here's your bring your own device. What does the district provide? That provides equity, satisfies more than one need, park testing, also an access from home that's filtered and things like that. So those are all the discussions we have when we analyze what we need here. And I just go back, I can't emphasize enough that whole process of getting this infrastructure built, we never said it included the devices. We really didn't. right? We made statements about, by building this infrastructure the way we did, we could buy a less expensive device.
Some of the things that were just said, part of what I was gonna ask about, but, one thing I might look for a little bit more information on, we're not early adopters in this. There are many school districts who have done the infrastructure upgrade, so at this point, there should be bring your own device examples as well as school-provided device examples. Could we look at a few of those and see what issues are coming up? Particularly with bring your own device, because that was the main part of our discussion when we went this direction.
You probably want to look at school committee. Most schools have moved first to policy on what does that mean. So you probably want to look at, and I don't believe you have a policy on bring your own device, but part of your DTOP policy, usually your digital technology policy, includes some of that. So I would say that's absolutely is where you start, to do, and look at that. That's in addition to the discussion that we should have around this.
Where are we going to use the funds from for this purchase?
Okay. Essentially, after almost 6 months of looking at the budget and our spending pattern, there are some areas we're clearly short in. Supplies, materials, as we've talked to you before, special ed tuition, special ed contracted services. We've added a number of paras also. There are some pluses. Even if no action were taken relative to the unfilled positions, there was some available funding in the health benefits account. We've done a little better than we thought we would. And then there's the funding for the positions that were not filled. And that has kind of a dual effect. There was about $550,000 in positions, and then there's the health insurance on those positions. So the bottom line of all of this is that we're looking at approximately $300,000 that's available at this particular point. So that would be the source of funding. Obviously that's a number as of now based on what we know now. Yeah.
All right. What's the pleasure of the committee? I would like to actually take this a little bit further and give him, my own preference would be give him the okay to act on this, because after the first of the year, a lot of other districts in the state and in the country are going to be placing orders for equipment and stuff, and if we get our order in the queue ahead of them, we have a chance of getting the equipment in sooner to work out the bugs and stuff, and to help get them up and running. So, do I get a consensus from?
Can I ask a question? If we weren't to purchase these items, then the district would be unable to participate in the parks.
No, we would still participate. We would have to do some work. We talked a little bit about reconfiguring. There'd be a lot of work on the part of our technology staff and our administrators to reconfigure the labs to make sure that they're the way they need to be. We'd probably have to extend.
Just if I could add,
Sure.
Realistically, you have a lab that can has 26 stations. If you do every other one, you're looking at 13 kids in the lab. You're looking to test 100 kids in this high school. We would have to disrupt all the business labs, and probably do it in waves. We probably couldn't test all 100 all at the same hour. So we really have to figure out all those logistics of how to accommodate testing. We could do it, right? But we'd have to really jump through hoops to accommodate the security, and I read that same thing that Dr. Nash read earlier about back-to-back and barriers and spacing between, and it was just crazy that you'd have to accommodate like that. There was even questions I got asked when I filled out the survey of, do you have classroom computers? Yes. Could they be easily moved to congregate into one local area? Well, no, not really. They can't easily be moved to do that. We just don't have that in place. You can't just create ad hoc labs out of thin air. So.
Yes, we said we would. Yes, we agreed to participate. You had to respond. It was a response based on the fact that we had the infrastructure in place, and if we opted out, we needed to have a very good reason for why we would opt out. No, we're part of a one-year, limited, you think about why wouldn't we, knowing that next year, every student in grades 3 through 8 will be taking this test. Now, whether or not they'll all be taking it online is still, the $24,000 question, or whether half of your district or not, those are questions.
Favorite part of this letter is if you have additional recommendations for how we can support you,
Sure.
please let us know.
We have,
I'd be happy to let them know.
yeah, we have done that for you on your behalf. I think, every district has said, how is this gonna happen? And to answer your question, Mr. Goodfellow, could it yes, we're not gonna, I don't wanna give you we would make it work. If you said no to us this evening, it would take a lot of work. Let me give you some things that I could think of very quickly. We'd have to extend the testing time. In other words, so we would not be testing, we'd be taking smaller groups of kids if we could do that. They say 4 classes, does that mean we could split up the class? I don't know. They haven't told us that. Does that impact the reliability and validity of the test if we took 10 students at a time? So it would extend the window, I assume. We'd probably use the maximum window of time instead of doing it so we disrupt classes more frequently. We would displace other kids who want that lab. I would then extend every single tech person in this district would need to be available for that extended time, because guess what? They're going to be in that room while that test is going on, so I've now extended that. So there are different things. We could make it work. Because your staff would make it work, your administrators would make it work, your technology people. Is it the best? I don't think so, because quite frankly, I think next year it's going to look very different. I think that you will see that kids will have devices in their hands that are smaller, Chromebooks, something else, and that we're going to now put them in a different situation, and it's going to just be more adjustment. So we're trying to get ahead of the curve in that, if we could, and to address the issue of the money, as you know, that really is those unfunded positions. Part of it, as you well know, was used to put back many of the SPED positions through technology that you'll hear through the paras that you'll hear about in the report this evening from the director. Also, we continue to have some concerns about some pressure points, so certainly, but you also have some overage. We're lucky that we have it in our benefits account. So it's a one-time purchase, if you will, so there's not a sustainability kind of thing, and it seemed to be either now or we'll just wait and come back at a later date.
Fred, the 300,000, that is anticipated free money covering all other shortages that we've been discovering this year, mainly in SPED, but some other ones?
Yeah, that covers, the shortfalls in supplies, materials, and special ed.
Including the 234,000 that's in?
Yes.
Yeah, everything we know as of now.
Because you had, I think, a little over 500, and then you've got a little additional money now as a result of the benefits account being, overfunded.
Thank you.
All right, so can we come to a consensus and agree either to do this or not? I would like to give our children all the tools and all the advantages to really highlight what a great district we have and a great teaching staff we have. And I think those third graders speak volumes to what's being done here.
Your recommendation would be to approve this document?
Not to exceed. We believe it's going to come in lower. This is the high end, but we're not sure. We weren't able to, all of this is on the bid, state bid list, excuse me, so. But I would be looking for a motion not to exceed that 60,000 to purchase what you see in the memo.
Okay. I will make that motion, not to exceed $60,000 for exactly what's specified in the memo.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion from the committee? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed?
No.
Okay, 2, 3, 4. We have 2 opposed, 4 voted yes. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's rolling over to the unfunded mandate again.
Well, we will continue to make you happy in January when I talk about two more. One is the fingerprinting law, which still has not gone into effect, and the second is Chapter 222, which carries additional cost and burdens to school districts to provide education to students who are either suspended or expelled. So just be prepared, there's some more coming. And that's why we get that frustration too, exactly. You know, when I said to you, I wasn't joking, you know, we have all expressed this as being obviously a financial burden to all school districts in the Commonwealth.
Okay, now moving on to number 3, donation.
Donation, so this is always a pleasure, and you remember I said to you that moving forward, we would bring forward donations as we receive them. This is the first donation that I would like the committee to accept. Our parent volunteer group at Plonquet Regional High School has donated a check in the amount of $158.78. This was as a result of a bake sale they had, and they are asking that these funds be used to purchase iTunes cards to be used for Mrs. Estrella's classroom, specifically for apps that they have on their iPads. As you know, Mrs. Estrella is a highly skilled teacher in our life skills program and our, at the high school. So I would ask that you approve these, this donation.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on it? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Would the chair like us to write a letter, accept, thanking them? Okay. We will.
Yes, letter of thanks.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to item B on the new business, and I will turn the meeting over at this point to Ms. Gomes, Chair of the Policy Subcommittee, on an update on the first reading of a policy. Ms. Gomes?
We have included a copy of the current policy in your packets. The subcommittee met last month, I believe it was, right, at this point. And we wanted to specify some points. And basically those points are that we wanted to hear what the community has to say in relation to the matters that they're bringing before the committee. However, we wanted to specify that public comment would not necessarily be a discussion, a debate, or a dialogue between or among the citizens and the school committee. Rather, it's intended to offer citizens an opportunity to express their opinion on issues of the school committee's business. While the committee or administrators will not typically respond to the comments or questions posed during public comment, the chair, as presiding officer of the meeting, may answer or request to answer a question if he or she deems it expeditious. We just wanted to let everyone know that what you're bringing to us is important. We want to hear what you have to say, but we may not be able to answer all of your questions. We want to hear it that night. We want to be able to think about it, or pass it along to the appropriate person. It's not all of the questions and comments coming before us are not within our purview. So those are basically, we want to keep it to, we felt that the 3-minute per comment rule was important, with a maximum of 15 minutes to be allowed for any session, that no votes would be taken by the school committee during this public comment session, and that basically all comments are made through the chair, and it's up to him. He may terminate any individual privileges if deemed appropriate. I think those are the main points that we were hoping to get across. Again, anybody coming up, we would ask that they identify themselves by name and address, and specific interest for their wish to speak. And that's basically just to let us know whether we have the authority of what's coming before us, and if not, we can direct the person speaking in the right direction. I had looked over many policies myself, different cities and towns, and I chose Braintree as being very similar to ours. So this one is a lot like Braintree's. So like I said, it's a first reading. We would like your comments, questions for us.
Was it discussed at all about repetitive statements by a number of individuals? I mean, the same point being made over and over and over again?
It was, and
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
one school district actually had a sign-up sheet for the people for community speaks on a clipboard, and had to put the topic that they wanted to talk about, which we kind of
We didn't think was totally
we didn't think was
necessary.
appropriate, but we kind of thought it was kind of interesting,
Right.
to say the least. Yeah, Mr. Goodfellow.
And to Mr. Clark's comments, if you're getting repetitive questions, then the issue may be important enough that a separate meeting be scheduled, or it be added to an agenda. And so, certainly, there is a portion of this proposed policy that addresses that. If the committee believes that the issue requires a broader dialogue with the public, the committee should be, thinking about it, as an agenda item or a special meeting for that purpose. But I was particularly pleased that this eliminates the limitation on the public only being able to address agenda items. But that being said, I think I've said it in the past, that community speaks shouldn't be considered the only opportunity for the public to address members of the school committee. That certainly, I know I do, and I hope that everyone here would make themselves available to the members of the community to discuss issues. So I just hope that the public doesn't believe that it would be the only time that someone will be able to address members of the school committee would be during a community speaks portion of the meeting. It is a meeting where we're conducting the business of the school, and there's usually very, very extensive agendas, and so we have to be able to attend to that business. But I think this is a good draft, and I'd be interested in hearing comments.
Is this going to be at any particular time during the meeting, or is it going to be ongoing?
It's going to be at it says right in here, a designated
Yeah.
time during the meeting. So based upon the agenda, like tonight, for example, when myself and Mr. Goodfellow met with Dr. Nash, we knew that we had people doing presentations, and rather than keep those people and those parents here late and stuff, we decided to put community speaks down a little bit further, and giving people an opportunity to also comment on the Alice school safety review that we chose to.
So you're going to keep the meeting recap in there as well?
No. Mr. Davenport?
I think Brett was, oh, certainly. Thought Brett had already, okay. I like this. Just a couple of housekeeping comments. The first is, in the first paragraph, the committee has set aside a period at each school committee meeting to hear from the public. There may be special meetings and occasions, and I think the upcoming superintendent interview meetings where we're not going to have community speaks, so I'm not so sure that we should bind a future committee or ourselves to always having community speaks. I think there should be some discretion to the type of meeting we're conducting and to the chair. So I'd maybe make a little edit there. On item 4, Bob touched on this a little bit. At a regular time, it does bounce around in the agenda. I think we would just note that it will be a specific agenda item, so that, like Bob said, it might not roll into other items during the meeting. And the only other comment I have at this time is on item 6. I understand the concept, but I'm not sure that we can create a policy to restrict members from making a motion. The member would have to be recognized by the chair, you know, to make a motion. But I don't think by policy we can restrict members in that way.
Once there's a motion on the floor and a second, community speak stops, and then it's just the school committee by Robert's Rules of Order that can speak. Or, so then you actually, in effect, shut down community speak. So we wanted to make sure that that didn't happen and that the community had our full attention, and we weren't directing our attention and our efforts to the motion on the floor.
If you were to make a motion on something that came up during community speaks, it wouldn't be an agenda item. I don't think you can even do that. I don't think that,
Well, it's just
you've given no warning to the public that this was going to, that this business was going to transpire.
Right, it's just a first reading, so I'll look at that. It
Yeah.
just strikes me a little strange.
Actually, to that point, you may not even need that, because it might not even be able to be done at all legally.
Mr. Kulikovich.
I have one curious part here, and that is, while I'm equally happy that the meeting agenda part, you know, in addressing more general concerns is great to see the agenda part come out. It also removed the discussion, because number 1 says topics for discussion must be limited, and now the second paragraph says public comment is not a discussion. And that capability to have a dialogue with the people that put us in these chairs needs to take place in a public forum. So I don't exactly think that that's a good addition. I think we need to retain that. This is a democratic process. We have people we're representing. Those people want to come here not just to speak their minds, but maybe to have an interaction through the chair, of course. And if we don't have something we can offer them at that time, of course, we just have to say, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to look into that. But the idea of discussion or dialogue is kind of, I would say, partly the purpose of what we're doing.
I would disagree only for the fact that, again, it's not an agenda item, so if somebody comes in and talks about the color that they're gonna paint Assawamsett, next year they're gonna paint the bricks pink, for example, it's not an agenda item, so we cannot discuss it.
I see. So, but if it is a discussion, it is an agenda item, would we have the ability to discuss it? Or it's the public comment that is not a discussion. I see.
We would have the ability to discuss it, correct. And that's why, like I said, we moved community speaks this time because of the Alice overview. We moved it after that and stuff, number 1, out of courtesy for the people coming in to speak for us, but also to give the community an opportunity to comment.
So on your example, if people heard that they were going to paint Assawamsett and enough people showed up for public comment that had remarks to make about it, we would probably add it to either an agenda item of a future meeting or have a separate meeting, like you're saying later. It's kind of like a catch-all.
Correct.
Okay, great. There you go.
But we are not painting Assawamsett pink, we're actually leaving it the way it is, I believe, so.
Great.
Do you have anything else?
There you go.
Anybody have anything else? Again, this is just the first read, so.
So we'll put it on for the next
Hold on.
meeting, which at the end, could we just discuss and confirm some dates, times, I should say.
I was actually gonna ask for that.
All right.
same thing.
Next, we have meeting recap, community comment. Welcome. Okay, moving on. I believe we are, reports to the committee, assistant superintendent for teaching and learning.
You have three reports this evening.
In your packet, you have a copy of my written report, and the slides that I'm presenting today are really just excerpts from those materials so that I have a visual to speak to, so that you can follow along without having to dig through the papers. Amy does have a copy of the PowerPoint, but because that information is already in my report, we didn't give it to you separately, or I didn't give it to you separately. The first really focuses on the fact that during our 2 full-day professional development and our 3 half-day sessions this year, we're focusing on 2 areas of study with the teachers. The first being the new educator evaluation system, and the second being continued curriculum development, refinement, etc. On our last full day of training, we did spend some time talking about the educator rating system, and there has been a lot of misconceptions about what that means, and so I just wanted to clarify a couple of quick points for the school committee. When educators are being evaluated using the educator evaluation system that was adopted last year, in this district, all educators will technically receive 2 ratings. One is from a negotiated rubric where the teachers will present, or the educators will present evidence of their proficiency, and evaluators will be making observations of classrooms. And that's where you get your rubric rating over on the left, and teachers will earn a rubric rating of exemplary, proficient, needs improvement, or unsatisfactory based on the evidence that's collected. The second rating in the educator evaluation system, which we're really just moving toward understanding more, is this idea of a rating that's based on teacher or educator impact of student learning. So we are following the definition provided by DESE around what those impact rating mean. A low impact rating would be looking at data sources and where students regularly make less than 1 year's growth in 1 year's time. We would say that the educator had a low impact rating. Where you make 1 year's growth in 1 year's time, that's a moderate impact, and where you make more than 1 year's growth in 1 year's time, that would be a high impact. So we're going to be looking at those 2 measures together, and basically while a person's rating won't change based on the summative rating for the rubric, the additional information provided by student data helps to determine what kind of evaluation cycle or plan a teacher would be on. So I just gave a very quick example that if a teacher is rated proficient using the rubric and they have moderate impact on student learning, and this is data that's collected over 2 years, then that teacher would be put on a 2-year self-directed growth plan. If you'd like more information about what that means, I can provide that at a later time. Again, if a teacher is seen as proficient but falls within the low impact of student data, you can see that they would be on a 1-year self-directed growth plan. And what this really does is it's sort of like triangulating data and making sure that sometimes your observations might be a little bit skewed. So if you have some concerns about observations, and then you find that the teacher's having a very high impact on student achievement, that gives you opportunities for discussion. And the other way around, we know that it's very prevalent in educational systems across the United States that 99% of teachers are rated as proficient or exemplary, but then we don't look at what impact they've had on student achievement. So we are looking at, as a group, there is a labor management group that's looking at these district-determined measures that will give us information on how teachers are impacting student achievement over the course of a couple of years. So we won't be actually seeing the second rating for 2 more school years, but that's one thing that's coming down the pike, and we're spending a lot of time working on that area. The second element that I just wanted to share out with you is that recently the school and district report cards published by DESE recently came out, and all families in the district were sent a message today explaining that both the school and the district report cards were online, and a copy of the district report card can be found in your packet. The next couple of slides, you can see that clearly there's a lot of information. If you happen to look at the paper in your packet, it's several pages long. Much of this data we've shared with you at earlier meetings, but there are 3 pieces in orange that I just wanted to focus on and bring to your attention tonight. The first is educator data, and it's really great to see that in our district, 99.7% of our teachers are licensed in their teaching assignments. 99.7% of our core academic classes are taught by teachers who are highly qualified, and we have a student-teacher ratio of 15.6 to 1. So as you look at those in relation to the state, we are making sure on a regular basis that all of our students have access to highly qualified teachers, and I just wanted to bring that information to your attention. The next part is our accountability data. As you know, last year we were considered a level 3 school district. That level determination is based on the lowest level any school in the district has received, and the level designation is based on student MCAS scores and whether or not students have met their target. This year, our level 3 school, Freetown Elementary School, actually raised its performance enough to be determined as a level, or designated as a level 1 school this year. Overall, we are still a level 2 district, which means that we are meeting our targets, or if we haven't met our targets, we've shown improvement in those areas. So just a couple of quick highlights around what our school report card says about our district. And again, I didn't put all the MCAS data in here because you've had an opportunity to hear that. So we've looked a lot at our proficiency gap narrowing, and you can see over on the left-hand side, and I would point, oh, that's not it. I would hit the little pointer thing if I knew how that worked, but I don't. Over on the left-hand side, these blue bars show our progress toward meeting our targets, and in ELA, you can see that while we are slightly below target, and I mean slightly, the blue line almost reaches the red bar in each area. So we have improved, but we are still below our targets in ELA, and so that is causing us to continue to look at our curriculum, instruction and assessment in the ELA area. As a district, we are doing really well in math. You can see that we are either on target or above target with all of our subgroups, including our high needs subgroups, which can be broken down into students with disability and low income students. In science, we're also doing pretty well in that while we did not hit our target in every area last year, we came very, very close, and where we didn't hit our target, we are improving. So this is really very good news for our district. The one piece that does continue to be a concern is when we look at our 4-year cohort graduation rate, and you can see that while overall we have a pretty high graduation rate compared to the state. Our 2012 rate was 92% of our students graduated in 4 years. Our state target was 80%, so we're 12% higher than the state. But what is concerning is that when you look at all students, we're doing really well, but we still are having some difficulties getting our low-income population to that rate that we would like them to be at. So in 2012, the graduation rate for students of low income was only 68%, and that's 12 points below the state average. So that's an area that the data says we should continue to focus on. The school report cards for each school are available on each school's website, and it is also available on the district website, and you can find that in 2 places. If you go to the home page, under the headlines at the bottom, we have posted the link to the report card there. If you'd like to look at previous year's report cards, up at the top where it says About Us, you can find additional information and previous year's report cards if you'd like to see how we have improved over a period of time. Is that less than 6 minutes? Are there any questions I can answer? Yes.
Could we back up to the first slide, the graphs of the 2 assessments?
I'm not sure which one.
Keep right at the beginning.
All right. Wait a minute. Oh, here. The evaluator rating system, yes.
I'm interested as this plays out a little bit more. If you have, I'm guessing you will, maybe not a lot, but if you have examples where you have on the summative rating proficient or exemplary, but then you have a low impact rating on student learning, or you have the opposite. You have high impact, but the summative rating needs improvement or unsatisfactory. Is that going to trigger trying to understand why the two assessments are so different?
I'm going to stand for a second just so I can point to the right things. Each of these 4 plans have different criteria. So a self-directed plan means that the teacher sets goals, both professional practice goals and student learning goals. They bring those goals to their administrator for approval, but they're pretty self-directed by the teacher. A directed growth plan means the administrator has looked at the teacher data and has said, these are some areas you really need to focus on, and then so they are directing the areas of growth, And then an improvement plan is very clear. That is the focus of the administrator. So there is that piece around these plans. Additionally, how long are you on a plan? And then if you were to look into the contractual language a little more deeply, you would find things like, if you are on a 2-year self-directed plan, minimally you have 1 announced and 1 unannounced observation per year. If you're on a directed growth plan, you have a minimum of 4 unannounced and 2 announced observations each year. So when you look at the intersection of these and it puts you on a plan, if you have a teacher who was rated in this category but has low student impact rating over a course of time and falls over here, they have many more opportunities to interact with their evaluator so that they can improve their practice.
But to also add to that, that's a great question. It triggers an automatic trigger for the administrator. And the trigger is, and actually the law says that it can move up to the superintendent. Why did that person get rated that way? Was it valid? If the data you're using, which you need to use is student growth over 2 years, and it was low, what were the reasons behind that? So it's an automatic trigger to happen. Now, we're not rating yet on this indicator at the bottom. And to Mr. Clark's question, there's another unfunded mandate, because the law now requires that every teacher where MCAS are not available have 2 district-determined measures that they need to be developed and approve, and be approved and be ones that could be used. So every individual who is a professional educator, from a school psychologist to a classroom teacher to a visual arts teacher to a music teacher, must, where there are MCAS or probably in the future PARC, we would use those, but where there are not, we must give them an opportunity to develop those, and those are used as part of the rating scale over the 2 years to collect that data. A lot of discussion. We have a labor management group that's been meeting. We are continuing to wait for additional information from both the MTA. There's some discussion as to whether those have to be bargained or not. Desi would probably offer one opinion, and I'm sure MTA would offer a different. But there is going to be some labor-intensive work that our staff are going to have to do, particularly in areas where we don't have those district-determined measures. There's a 67 or 87-page technical manual on the whole concept of reliability and all the other factors in these measures. So, but your question is an excellent one, because it does kick in this trigger. If someone is getting that, it's an automatic, wait a minute, something's off here. Yeah, absolutely.
That's really one of the big benefits of this educator evaluation system. It's not as subjective as previous evaluation systems have been.
It's going to take a number of years for all districts to really feel comfortable in this. We're all in infancy stages, really. Using it, it's a very involved process. It requires a great amount of time on everyone's part to do it. I really applaud the efforts that the district has taken prior to coming here to negotiate an instrument, but also to start using it. They implemented it mid-year last year, really, just get it off. And so we've been successful on that end, but there's still your work to be done.
Anybody else from that? All right, thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you.
Yes, next report is the Director of Finance report. You've heard a little piece of it, but not the big piece, so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Baker.
I gave you some comments on some of the operational issues in the business sector, and if you have any questions on them, I'd be glad to answer those.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here tonight. I wanted you to know that on the professional development day, I had the opportunity to meet with the entire special ed staff
which was very exciting. It's not easy to do if we don't have the whole day off because of the various schedules at the buildings. And together we came together to look at the IEP and look at how we are servicing students throughout the district and to really develop more common language together around the IEP. There's obviously the laws that govern the IEP, but the interpretation of that has been somewhat different at the buildings, and we are working on and working together. It's very exciting to work with the staff who come to an all-day professional development session and sit there eager the entire time that you're talking, and working together to look at ways to continue to advance what we're doing with our students. It's very exciting to be a leader in that realm with those teachers. I love my job, so it's wonderful. As is common in special education, we've had some motility in students in the district. We've had some move-ins. We've had some students require additional placements out of district, and we've had some students that placements were sort of already in the works before I even stepped foot in the door. Those students have resulted in an increase to our out-of-district tuitions at $234,000. That's just tuition money. That's a lot of money, and I've looked very carefully and considerate at each and every one of those placements and had as many conversations as I can about the expense, but the fragility of the students and meeting the students' needs. And then I just wanted to share with you that I had the opportunity to go over to the middle school. Dr. Nash and I went over and had Thanksgiving with the students in the life skills classroom. It's a wonderful 10-year long tradition that's been going on at the middle school. They put on a phenomenal home-cooked meal. The students are highly engaged in every aspect of the process. Community donations come in, and this amazing thing happens in these two little classrooms. That was just really, for me, it's an experience where I sit back and say, wow, this is just an amazing community to be a part of, and I am, again, so glad to be here. So.
Anybody have any questions?
The closing of the program at the high school, are all of the issues surrounding that, the placements and concerns, is that all resolved and complete at this point, would you say?
I would say yes.
I would just mention to you that the $234,000 figure that's mentioned in the report, that was all factored into, because we knew that ahead of time, into the information I gave you.
In other words, we don't want you to think that's an
So
additional
that's not an addition, that's
234. When we
part
said to you that
of
money
the
that was
situation.
available, that's accurate, based on this 234 being part of that.
Because Fred's office is right next to mine, so we have to talk to each other all the time.
Anyone else? Thank you very much. Okay, at this point, any other business that may probably come before the committee? I know we're going to talk about just a little informational.
I actually have to contact Bill Markson, he runs the storage facility up on Common Road, hiring about, actually, a vehicle. But we're gonna do a discussion. He invited me down because he wanted to show me the geothermal heating system that he has that takes care of this facility. And I stopped in unannounced, so I kind of imposed on his time a little bit, but he was good enough to take me around and show me some of the things that, the setup that he has, and it's pretty impressive. And I applaud him for even thinking of the school district with regard to trying to save us some money. I'm no geothermal expert, but he's very, very knowledgeable on the subject. I know, speaking to Dave, he went down, I'm not sure when he went, but he got a tour as well. I wonder if we should have Bob Souza at some point go down there and take a look at what the setup is and get some more information. He probably knows more about it than I do. And just see what the feasibility is of something like that. Because, as I said, it's very impressive, and he was good enough to invite me down and take me on the tour. And I just think it's something that we should be looking at. If we're all trying to save money, why not look at that?
Yeah. Sure. If you give us that contact information, we Gentlemen, we certainly can add that, and to Bob Souza and Fred oversees it.
He seems quite willing to entertain any visitors from the school committee or the school.
And we are developing a capital plan around facilities multiple years, but if I could just add a couple of facilities improvements that we're making, that I think it's somewhat timely, because you may see them as you go around. We have purchased, rented, I should say, 2 pods for each of our elementary schools. You may see them in place. Unfortunately, we had gasoline stored inside our buildings because it was in equipment. So when we learned of that, we made the immediate decision that we needed to get the tractors and the snow blowers and the things out of our buildings because they were stored there. So if you see those, we're renting those. Do we have an option to buy, or is it just a?
It's a straight rental.
Straight rental at this point in time, but you'll see them, they're already there, they're in place. The second thing that I would point out is that if you get an opportunity to go into AES, hopefully after vacation, and I hope you don't visit the nurse's office, but if your child is sick, you'll see that the carpeting will be gone. It certainly is a health hazard. You've had a child sick recently. It's not something that I would ever think that you would want to have in a health office. So that will be gone, and I have to thank Bob Souza and the nurse and all of those, and Mr. LaBelle, who brought it to my attention just anecdotally. And I guess I should have just thought more about it, but when this is a sick season now, and we certainly are not helping our students get well when we have them in that kind of facility. So that will be gone, and Bob has taken very quick action on it, and we'll get that cleaned out and have the tile in there for them. So it'll be, all health offices will have tile floors, which are much easier to keep healthy and clean. So I just wanted to point, in case you see that, that I think the price that we received on that was, I think the estimate was around $3,000, which I think is not bad money, a little bit more than that maybe, but so I'm happy that that's going to be able to be done over Christmas break.
To get back to my original statement, do we need a consensus to have Bob go down and take a look at this facility, or is everybody in agreement that that might
Sure.
be something?
With these huge heat sinks out here.
Yeah, sure. Yes, yeah.
Having been there before on a rather extensive tour, which included going underground, I would be happy to
Okay.
join in that expedition.
Okay.
And, anyone who's uncomfortable with
Do you
going
have the
underground is
name of the,
absolutely
you
glad
can give
to
us the
go
name of the
around.
gentleman? Bill Moxon.
Yeah, if you could send that out to the whole committee when Bob's gonna go.
Yep.
Okay.
That would go.
Seeing as we're on this subject, and I might just be forgetful, but we were talking about solar power. A company approached us, and
Yes, and Fred is
is that-
working on trying to
You're also working on the leases.
pin that down, and with Middlewell, Jamie.
so that's ongoing.
It's close to closure.
At this point, being that the hour's getting late, I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session for reason number 3, to discuss strategies with respect to litigation, if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation position. Public body, if the chair so declares, I declare, and not to consent.
So you take care of the boss.
Sure, we do have a collective bargaining update also.
Okay, so we do have a collective bargaining.
So moved. Okay. Before you, I'm sorry, I forgot, because we're still in session, I think, could we set, since it is a public meeting, your next meeting is January 8th, and then that's a regular school committee meeting, but the 11th is a Saturday, which is a budget-only meeting, so I don't know if you want to set a time for that, for purposes of people who need to start time. I don't know if that's something that you typically.
Done 9 o'clock.
All right, so we'll post it as a 9, and that way people who might want to know and attend on a Saturday in January when they're doing not a lot, unless they're skiing, may know that in advance. So thank you. Okay, thanks. That was it.
Dave Davenport?